Hey, hi, hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Cageless Podcast. Or if you are watching this on YouTube, welcome to the Cageless YouTube channel. That feels weird to say because I never really considered myself a YouTuber. I've always made videos, so somewhere in the ether of possibilities, I've ended up this way. Today, I want to talk about something really important to me. I always talk about things that are important to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making videos on the internet. Well, I guess that's not true. There's a lot of people in the world that make videos that aren't that important to them. But I think my purpose on this earth is to be vocal about subjects that light me up and I think are imperative for the growth of all of us to speak about. And so I wanted to discuss something because I was inspired a few days ago at a bar, well, an epicerie that is affiliated with a bar here in Paris that is special to me. And the people that I was with were having a discussion about the validity of Christianity in today's culture. And I love this conversation. I think it's more important to have this conversation outside of a church than it is to have it inside of a church, because if you're already inside the walls of a church, you probably have some sort of curiosity or agreeance about the subject of Christianity or the belief of Jesus in general. And I wanted to start out by saying that I was raised a believer, but I didn't always practice the way of Jesus. And this is important to note because I studied formal Christianity. I studied theology in an academic setting, and I dropped out of this school and residency program for 3 reasons. One, I disagreed with the structure of the church itself and the way that things were ran. 2, I disagreed with how they treated people of minority and women and people that were just different than cisgendered white middle class men. And 3, I felt a nudge in my spirit that there had to be a different way to learn and a different way to experience and evangelize in the way of Jesus. And today, I genuinely believe that it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, even though it was really scary to let go of everything that I had ever believed and choose to embark on a brand new path that I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going. But I think it's more important to know what you don't want than it is to know what you do want. And it's more important to know what you don't believe more than it is important to know what you do believe. Because when you start to weed out the things that you don't, the list gets longer. And the list of the things that you do believe in and that you do want to embark on or understand or take part of gets shorter and shorter. And I think the phrase is 4 quarters is better than 100 pennies. I don't know what that is in euros. I wish that I did. But it's important to have pillars of what you believe, and knowing that you don't want those 100 pennies or 100 different ways of thinking is more important. And so I started working at a church, not because I was this super headstrong Christian, but because I actually kind of fell away from the faith when I was in university, when I was in college. I was raised a Methodist, and I was taught a very traditional way of practicing Christianity. Being brought up in the Deep South, in conservative town, Texas, there's really only one of 2 denominations that you are, and that is either Methodist or Baptist. And there are other ones, Church of Christ and a few different, but so little Catholicism. It's not as potent in like the Deep South towns. In some of the bigger towns, it is, but Greek Orthodox and Catholicism and some of the larger, extremely structured organizations aren't as strong, or at least the culture of them isn't as strong. And so being raised a Methodist, I was raised in purity culture. I was raised in You go to church 2 times a week on Wednesdays and Sundays. You take part in Christian missions. It's, I always wanted to challenge structure. It felt very caged into me, which is ironic because now I actually love structure in theology, not so much in the historical context, but I think that there's something to say about creating spaces that are holy. I love the entity of community and going to Sunday school, going to vacation Bible school. When you're young, you kind of learn, just like you learn the ABCs or how to count. At that age, this like very baseline foundational concept. And I loved it. I thought it was so interesting and magical, and learning the biblical stories behind them, which I should do an entire episode on some of my like favorite biblical stories. But I knew that I felt in my bones that even though I saw the way that some of the men in my church treated women and people of color and institutions and politics that they disagreed with, that there was something really real to this story of Jesus. And so I kind of fell away from my practices and going to church and my like good girl belief system, purity culture upbringing when I went to university, and I started hanging out with people completely on the opposite side. And I think in all of us Christians, there is a curiosity, and not that we're all doubting Thomases, but you have to discover what you don't believe in, and you have to see the world. We weren't called to live as this very separate entity. It's really clear that Christians are meant to live among the world. This is where we have been set out to be in this lifetime. We're not supposed to be hermits. And so living amongst people and going to school with them and creating with them, because I studied cinema and I made short films and music videos, and I studied this thing that I was really passionate about, which was storytelling, with people who didn't believe the same faith that I did. And so they didn't believe in the fruits of the Spirit, and they acted upon their impulses and their passions. And I think that there's like a Venn diagram of what is like godly love and passion and what is worldly love and passion. And there are things that even in today's world, people are like super positive about saying like, oh, that's bad spiritual energy. But they're really negative and unbelieving about believing in demons. And yet Jesus was the one who came to this earth 2,000 years ago. And in the grand scheme of the universe, that's pretty recent. And he cast out demons and he healed the sick. And I believe that God's plan, it's supposed to be good, and sin and our humanness and our brokenness are what made it bad. So miracles of casting out this sin is the way that like the world is supposed to work. It's the way that Christians are supposed to act. We're supposed to love one another and take care of one another and cast out demons and get rid of bad spiritual energy in the name of Jesus. And so I eventually ended up going to a church and kind of finding my way back to Jesus after being very prodigal son and trying to discover who I was outside of my faith. I realized that it was only a part of the journey, and I could only discover who I truly was in the next step of my life at the age of 21 if I came back to my Father and I came back to my core. Even though I really wanted to reject it, I wanted to find my own way and be super independent on my own. There was something deep in me that wasn't finding any satisfaction in the ways of the world, in drinking or drugs or any kind of creative pursuits that weren't in the name of brightness and love and togetherness. And this kind of cost me some friendships. I actually lost one of my closest friends in college, and he was my closest collaborator, my closest guy friend that I ever had. And it was such a loss because we were so close and we were in that Venn diagram together, but there were so many things that were separate. And it broke my heart because it got to a point where even though I wasn't fully practicing my faith, I still think it shone out in some ways. And I defended Christians, and he was kind of insulted by that. And so after that kind of like friend breakup, I ended up going back to a church, and this was more like a mega church. And I encountered the Holy Spirit for the first time as an adult. And it's really hard to describe, but it was like a bright golden light that started to be revealed in my chest. And I know that sounds crazy, and it's because it is crazy, because it's faith. And after that Thursday night, a friend had invited me to that church, and she had explained to me like the ways that I could volunteer at the church, and I started to make friends. And then I eventually ended up going into a seminary program after I graduated university because I was so on fire for Jesus. And in this seminary program, as I mentioned before, I really learned that this golden light that I had felt that was so pure and good, and I felt of the Lord, which your feelings are not always an accurate parameter of reality, but I think there's a knowing in each of us, and it's really hard to explain with words, but my golden light was being dimmed and broken by the ways I was seeing people treating others in this church. And the way that we were studying the Bible seemed so dogmatic, and so all of our readings and all of the academic ways of studying biblical theology seemed to all be written by the same kind of people, these middle-class cisgendered white men who were all raised the same way and thought the same things. And I thought, like Jesus didn't hang out with people who were all the same. He actually was upset how the Pharisees kind of continued to just ag each other on and confirm each other's thinking. And so nothing extremely abusive inherently happened to me there, but it was important for me to leave because it felt so unaligned with what I truly believed in my heart. And so when I left this church, I ended up living in California and working in the entertainment industry for a little bit. And after that, and I'm very much glazing over a lot of things, we can do a Q&A or more of a deep dive into extremely logistical things. So if you have questions, let me know, because I'm always excited to talk about details of the American church. But I left because I was reading a book about St. Francis of Assisi. I left as in I left America, and I wanted to discover what it meant to live like someone who deeply trusted the unknown. That's essentially the story of how I got to where I am. I live in Paris, France, and I have been attending the American church in Paris, which is a Protestant, essentially non-denominational church. You can look more into their doctrine on their website, but it's a very holistic and loving community of believers that are international here in Paris. And I think it's really important that anyone who's watching this, that's just kind of an overview of my story and the injustices that I saw and the curiosities that I have at 28 years old. But more than anything, as St. Francis of Assisi says, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. So I think your actions and your curiosities and the things that you read and the things that you digest that align with the fruits of the Spirit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, these things that are of Jesus, and apprenticing under him and looking at the way that he lived. You don't just have to read the Bible. You can read historical books. You can go read the Torah. You can go read about Buddhism. You can read about so many different belief systems and learn what you don't think is true. Make your own decisions about if you want to be a Christian. Learn about who Jesus was. Why was he countercultural? Why did he fight injustices? How did he act towards marginalized people? Why did he give to the poor? How did going into seclusion, praying, meditating, change the state of who he was? And why was he this perfect guy that was so confusing to the culture that was alive when he was here? And so those are the questions that I tried to explore, and some of the recommendations that I could give anyone wanting to deconstruct their faith. I love the teachings of Dallas Willard. I love the teachings of Jackie Hill Perry. I love the teachings of, right now, I am reading a book that I'm kind of obsessed with. I'm going to go grab it. It's by a French theologian who was considered a Christian anarchist in his day, which I love. His name is Jacques Ellul, and it's called Presence in the Modern World. And he just talks about what it means to be a believer in today's world. And even though he is a dead French man, I think that a lot of his teachings are really potent. But if you get anything out of this, I hope that it's that you're allowed to make your own decisions. You're allowed to form your own belief system. Take time to sit with yourself and take time to sit with your soul and ask the questions that other people around you are too afraid to know the answers to, because you only have one life. And in sociology, psychology, the sciences will continue to back this, that your faith is a potent part of your well-being. And we all believe in something. You just should know what you believe in. We all have a religion. What do you follow every day? Is that what you scroll on your phone looking at? Or is it the altar that you worship at? Because either way, it's going to affect your happiness. I love you guys. I feel like that was also just one long-winded thing. Also, love that I'm wearing a blazer. I promise I'm not a theologian scholar, or I'm just a amateur, but I think we're all kind of amateurs at a lot of things. I just want us all to feel less alone in our belief journey. And I would love to know what you think and how you feel and what your deconstruction journey has looked like. So you can comment below or send me a message, and I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks for listening.